Welcome to the VIP Exchange, Champions in the Chaos, with Stephen Iwersen, a program for people who want to turn the chaos of business and life into positive outcomes and forward momentum. Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining me on VIP Exchange, Champions in the Chaos. I really do appreciate your time.
Great. It's an honor, and it's also my pleasure.
Well, thank you again. You Champions in the Chaos. I thought maybe you and I could just talk a little bit about leaders and how they're trying to work through a lot of the chaos that most of us have been through for the last couple of years and will continue to work through, specifically in the area of culture. I know that that's a really passionate part of your work that you do with leaders across the country. And I'm having a hunch that culture's taken a hit because of the work from anywhere kind of environment. And just wondering, have you found that to be true with the clients that you work with?
Interestingly enough, yes, with some clients, but for the majority, they have been able to keep their cultures intact. So I think one of the biggest jobs of a leader is to be able to give people hope that not only we're going to get through this, there is going to be a better tomorrow. It may not be tomorrow, but there is going to be a better tomorrow. And I really believe that's the job of a leader, is to be able to communicate a positive vision. We got this. And if any team can figure this out, our team can. And so in terms of the actual data, our firm does about 50 employee engagement surveys a year. And we have three benchmarks. We have an overall benchmark where we can measure all of the companies we serve with surveys. We have a first timer benchmark, what we call a baseline benchmark, because the first time an organization does a survey, they characteristically come in about 10 to 12 points below our benchmarks. And then we have a best of the best benchmark. It's the top 25% of the organizations we work with. And one of the things that we've seen for the successful organizations, that if they feel their leaders truly care about their health, both mentally and physically, and the employees can actually feel that, the organizations and the leaders have scored incredibly high on these employee engagement surveys. The ones where the employees have felt that the organization has put the customer in front of the employee's health or put press in front of the employee's health, they've suffered more on the results of the survey, sometimes shifting 5 to 7 points down. And we write it off, it's the pandemic, but it really has to do with their relationship that people feel in this leadership piece of the puzzle. And as a leader, I got to be able to create positive results. And I've got to recognize that my job is to continuously improve my organization, my team, and my team members. And that has to be a really significant piece of my focus. But people also need to know I deeply care about them personally and professionally and their health.
That's good. And that's challenging right now because a lot of companies, 2 or 3 that I've just worked with in the last 30 days, are really struggling with trying to convey that they care about their team members and balance that with the need that they see to start bringing people back to the work environment. And employees are going, I'm not wanting to do that. There's health concerns. And how are you helping leaders convey that importance of we care about you, but at the same time, we got work to do?
So I work as an executive advisor to about 25 leaders. And I will tell you, going through this pandemic, some of the best leaders I've worked with have really struggled. And the ones who've struggled the most are the ones who've had kids at home and are trying to help be a parent and a good parent to their kids, and also trying not to lose a step with their business at hand. And so I've had some pretty low moments or low times with really significant leaders, helping them to, one, regain their hope, and then also be able to convey that to their leadership team and to their team members. And so it's not been easy, and we've had to find different ways to connect via Zoom, because we know that the lack of connection does, for sure, with a percentage of our population, have an impact on how they feel about their job and how they feel about their team. It's only been, in, I want to say maybe 2 weeks, that one of the largest organizations I've worked with, they have just said this: we are not coming back indefinitely. And they've said that to their most senior leaders as well, which to me I just sit there and I go, there really is no hope if we're telling the senior leadership team, you're staying home indefinitely. And so they've actually sold off or released the leases on 2 of their large buildings. And so there's significant change going on. There is not going to be going back to normal. There really isn't a normal right now. We are in a time where we all have to figure out what's the environment and how do I adapt?
Yeah, yeah. I just spoke yesterday to somebody and said that you hear the phrase the new normal, and I got to say, I don't think it's normal. I think it's just new.
Right.
And we just have to keep moving forward. In your book, Why Leaders Fail, the book that you co-authored with Mary Kelly, one of the chapters I just devoured was the importance of team. And one of the things you cited in that book was that dysfunctional teams tend to make every effort they can to avoid getting together, of having meetings. I would imagine that with our virtual environment now and our need to meet via Zoom or other platforms, that challenge for leaders who are trying to lead a dysfunctional team is even heightened more. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, Stephen, you are right on target to pick that off. And it's not only just dysfunctional teams, it's dysfunctional team members. They will do anything humanly possible not to meet. Mm-hmm. And so I always tell them it's really good for my business. It's not good for your business as an executive team. And so when we talk about this team, one of the biggest challenges is people forget we all are on the same team. And when I coach leaders, I always ask them, reread your email before you hit send, to just say, instead of saying I or you, do we talk we? Because we really are all on the same team. And your primary focus, if you're an executive, has to be to the executive team. We have to be united. Because if it's not united at the executive level, as it goes down to the mid-level management teams, it actually increases the division in the house. So now we have 2 executives who don't work well as a team, and it gets worse for their direct reports because they already know the top doesn't get along. I might as well just contribute. And so one of the most important determinants of your promotability as a manager or as a leader is your reputation for cross-departmental teamwork. And there's only 2 types of reputations. There's good ones and the bad ones. And people who have a bad reputation for being a collaborator, a good communicator, a good leader cross-departmentally struggle in moving up the ladder because there's a lot of people who informally vote against their next promotion.
I've seen that many, many times. Now, with the challenge of team members who are dysfunctional, I think what I hear frequently from the high-performing real achievers is an exasperation of the fact that the executives, the supervisors, are tolerating the behaviors. And oftentimes what I've seen happen is that the leaders send out that email and it's we, and it's a message about we need to step up and we need to perform and we need to show up and all those things, when in reality it's 1 or 2 people. And everybody who gets that email just rolls their eyes in exasperation because they know it's not for them, but it feels like a little dig when they know it's about 1 other person. Right. What advice do you have for a leader who's trying to balance all that? And what do you do? Because it's really a tough conversation.
Right. So about maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I was working with the CEO of a credit union, and their employee engagement data was unusual. And it was unusual because it was a highly rated culture as an organization, but the executive team was not united as a team. And so their scores actually became in lower than the overall organization scores. So I presented to the executive team and I talked about, if you do not change this, I will predict that the scores are going to cascade down in a future story, not rise up. And afterwards, I had a conversation with the CEO. And what it really amounted to is he has 1 team member who's incredibly gifted technically, okay, knows the technical parts of their job and excels immensely, but is I'm going to be blunt, a horse's ass to work with. He treats people respectfully. He thinks he is the smartest person in the room and communicates that. And I talked to the CEO and I said, you have to sit him down and you have to have the courage to say, you know what, there's really two parts of your job. One of them is the technical parts of your knowledge and your skills. And I need you to know you're a 10 out of 10 on that. The second part is your ability to communicate, collaborate, and work as a team member with our overall executive team. In that area, you're a 1. And I need you to know moving forward, you're not going to be fully qualified for your job if you stay a 1. And the CEO said to me, Peter, if I do that, I think you might quit. And I said, so I need you to take your box of business cards, give them back to marketing and ask them to reprint your title as hostage. Because that's what you are in this situation. You're a hostage. And I said, until he knows that you are willing to say, if you're not going to change, that I am willing to take this action, you have no chance of him changing his behavior. So as the way you're sitting right now, it's almost as though there's not one other executive in the entire United States that could take his job. And I said, I need you to know that is not accurate. And furthermore, you lose respect as a leader, not just because this leader knows he can do what he wants to do and you're not going to hold him accountable, but to every other team member who watches this, they don't respect you either because they know you don't have the guts to handle the problem. And so as a leader, I really do need to hold people accountable. The ending thing I said to this executive, and I've worked with them probably about 5 years, but this was the most direct I've ever been with, is I said, this executive does not care about you or your success. Because if they do, they would not create a situation that you have to deal with and not create a negative outcome of which the whole team is dealing with. I said, if they truly cared about you and your success, they would be a role model of a leader and they would be helping you build this team.
So it's important for leaders to convey and to make every effort to show that they care about their team members, regardless of where they're at in the structure. But it's also important that they're modeling the same expectation of those team members, that they should be respecting of each other and respecting of them, because it is that team. So how did this leader respond to that comment about reprinting the business cards?
You know, it's one of those that it's hard to argue with, but I also said, if there's anything I can do to support you, I am here. And so I don't know if I'll get another call back because I'm really working more as a project base versus the advisor base in this particular client setting. But I am not convinced he has the courage to go hold this leader accountable.
Yeah.
You know, I did tell him also, it's really good for my business, not so good for yours.
Yes. And if he were to step up and have that conversation, the morale of everyone else in the organization is just going to take a boost because they're going to see somebody with a little courage and backbone, which is what they're probably waiting for.
It falls under the umbrella for me is do the right thing. Mm-hmm. You know, it's, if he treated one of my team members that way, I would just say, you know what, I need you to know if there's a problem, come to me, I'll get it corrected. But to have that type of interaction with one of my team members, it's not going to happen twice. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's the right thing. You know, if my team member, you know, treated them disrespectfully, that's another issue. I'll coach and counsel that, but that's not going to happen from my side. So you have to be willing to do the right thing. And the leaders who are willing to do the right thing usually do well in this business.
Right. Well, let's take this just a little further into the world of the virtual interactions, because I know one of the things that you really promote with those that you work with is face-to-face meetings, of really getting to understand each other. And that means even in face-to-face, working through the disagreements and trying to flesh it out to understand the why so they can be a better team. How are leaders supposed to do that when it's little boxes of video images on a screen and it's not really as face-to-face as we'd like?
Yeah, in working with a couple executives at a hospital recently, one of them sent an email to the other and had like 4 paragraphs, and the middle paragraph blamed the other executive for the problem. So the other executive responds to each one of the paragraphs, adds about 3 more paragraphs, and then copies like 6 other executives on the email so that they all could enjoy it. And in terms of, what do I do in that situation? I coached the one executive I work with, and I said, don't you ever do that again. When someone sends you an email and blames you, you're going to send them back one line, and the one line that says this: we need to talk. Can we set up a Zoom call at 2 p.m.? And that's the last thing that person who just sent a blaming email wants to see. And so, yes, I am in favor of in-person meetings, but right now we gotta do what we can do. And so for a lot of team members, we're going to get this, conversation like you and I have, looking at each other on the screen. And I truly have learned. So I'm going to take you back to March of 2020. I flew back from Hawaii from a client there. COVID hit, the whole thing gets shut down. Everything that I was doing in person gets canceled. The executive advisory work I was doing, that didn't change because leaders really needed a lot of support. But I was sitting in my office, and yes, what did I do? I pretty much just was playing the stock market and having fun. I mean, I didn't have that much to do. And I went probably about 45 days and said, if I don't nail down this Zoom thing and this team things, I have a chance of becoming irrelevant in this business. And so I just started calling the clients I've had training with, and I said, we can put this off for a year or two, or we can move it to Zoom. Had really good success with the clients I'm working with. So I took 2 online training programs, moved it to Zoom. All of the executive coaching and advisory work moved to Zoom. I will never travel again to do one-on-one executive advisory work. Okay. It has, one, added so many hours back into my life, and 2, I'm here to tell you, I feel like I'm working right next to you right now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's been a big change, but people will use it. I've had one recently where somebody said, well, you know what? I'm going to wait till they come into the office. Well, you know what? Somebody who sends that type of email, it's going to be a long time before they show up to your office.
Right. That's right. Yeah. I spoke to an executive last week who is really weighing this. Do we move everybody back to the office? And he really wants that to happen. He's hesitant to not move that direction because he doesn't like Zoom. He doesn't like all the virtual interactions. It's just not his preference. But he brought up in the conversation that one of his best people just told him that they're leaving the organization within just a couple of weeks because they're going to go join a company that's going to allow them to work 100% from home. And that was a big wake-up call for him. Going forward, let's just think about the next 2 years, 1 to 2 years. What do you see as the opportunities for your business as you really lean into the virtual side of things?
In terms of the opportunities, I see opportunity that I really now for the first time have availability that I can come and give a speech or do a leadership training session for an organization in person. And I feel totally comfortable doing it on Zoom. And I've also learned this, some of the participants actually like Zoom training better than they do in person because it saves them time. They can go incognito if they don't want to participate at that moment. And so what I think is the people who value it the most on Zoom get the most out of it. There's some people that show up probably because they have to, and I'm not going to change that. But for me, it's given me the ability to say, do you want to do this session in person or should we keep it on Zoom? And so it's really given me flexibility. But I wanted to go back to that piece you were talking about, the executive telling you one of the employees leaving. Yes. I really do believe this. You have to be flexible now because it just expands out the number of people potentially that can work for you. I saw recently a good article. There really is no shortage of employees. They're just not working for you.
That's a good title.
They're just not working for you. And so it was on a call yesterday with an organization that used to have all their team members in Phoenix. Now one of them was in Chicago. One of them was in Minneapolis. They're all over, but functioning as a high-performing team. And so I think you have to be flexible. Even with my own team, I kind of need height support. Okay, so I want my team members here. Is the pandemic hit, and I didn't see him for like 2 months, maybe 3 months. And I learned this: I don't like being all alone. At least have one person here to help support me, but I've also been with the other team members flexible and saying, you know what, Run right now has 2 children with COVID. You're staying home.
Yes.
And I'm fully supportive. So
Yes.
it's one that I have learned I can be really well supported remotely also.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I think a lot of people who didn't like virtual experiences and virtual team meetings just months ago have gotten used to them, and they're getting more comfortable. They may still might need be their first choice, but that that ability to interact is still important to them. And leaders really do need to have this understanding that there's going to be a variety of different approaches to doing this, and we have to be open to that.
When you talk about leading a team out of crisis, there's something that I work with executives on, and it's what I call the J curve. And the J curve is this. Right now, we're here in this crisis or here in our performance. And the minute I impact change into this, and so here would be an example, a healthcare organization is putting a new electronic medical record in because the last one keeps breaking. The minute I implement that, we're actually going to move into the belly of the J. Things are going to get worse. They're going to take longer. And the worst thing a leader can do is back out of the J and try to go back to what we were, okay, to try and get us out of this crisis. And the key to a leader's success is in this belly of the J, we're not backing out. We're moving forward. And the second thing, what we're going to do is we're going to meet daily. And even if it's only for 15 minutes, we're going to talk about what went well or right yesterday, what was the crisis or the thing that was stopping us from being successful yesterday, and what's our actions for today. And we're going to do that each day. And I also always add one more thing. This is a crisis, but what gave me inspiration this morning is that if any team can figure this out, this is the team that can do it. Let's get to work.
The value of sharing information consistently and involving them into how we're going to get it done, and that inspiring, that's perfect for leading people through all of that. I love that. You know, I've found that a lot of leaders, when they get in crisis, they kind of pull away and step into the vacuum because they're a little overwhelmed themselves, and they communicate less, which compounds the problem. And without the right information, people start making up information, which is a whole new crisis of its own. So I love the way you're approaching this.
Yeah, almost always the made up information is bad. Okay. Yeah. It's never good information they're doing. And so I want to say, and you said it already, is over communicate in a crisis. And the second thing for the leaders listening to this podcast is I want them to be thinking on every email, who else should be included on this? Because we are on one team. And almost every time I reread an email, 2 things come out of it. I need to change I to we, okay, because we're united. And number 2, I usually think about who else do I need to include on this so they are in the loop. And so if you get an email from me, I will promise this, very seldom is it just me on the email. When I was interacting with you, Marilyn was taking the lead on the email, because every time she's on the email, I don't have to worry about that detail. We're all in the loop.
Right. That's good. Very good. Well, I know that you have a number of resources. You've written 10 books, hundreds of articles, and you've got some resources. How could people reach out and connect to you, and what would you recommend that they look into?
The easiest way to connect with me is my website is peterstark.com, and on that is a place for where I put my blogs that come out every week or every other week, and it's always on a leadership topic I'm working with an executive on. So there is real life as they get in terms of trying to give people suggestions or tips to deal with real life issues leaders deal with. So that's the easiest way. I am on Amazon and I am on Audible for the books that I've written, and I've written several in the area of leadership, and I've also written 2 in the area of negotiation skills. And that's probably been the best seller that I've ever written. I wrote it through Random House and Crown Business Books, and that book has sold over 150,000 copies. And so it's one that I wrote it originally in 2003. In 2016, Random House came back and said, we want to republish this. So I actually got to include topics like negotiating by email. which was
Oh.
not included in 2002 and 2003. So that's the easiest way to connect with me. My email is peter@peterstark.com. I don't do any work with individuals. I am only contracted through corporations or nonprofits supporting their leadership team. So if somebody just had a question and said, I want to run that by you, it's peter@peterstark.com. There's no charge for that.
Hey, that's fantastic. Well, again, I want to thank you for spending some time with us today. And I know that leaders who are listening in and viewing this have gained some insights that should, without question, help them through the chaos that they're going through right now. And with that, I'm just going to ask if you have a final word of encouragement for those folks who are listening.
My final word is for every leader to be focused on what their real job is, and that is to improve the condition of their team members, and their organization daily, which means that a leader is implementing continuous change, which means that a great leader is going to get this from someone. You're never happy. You know what? I'm happy every day, but I also know my job, which is continually improving the organization. And there is not one improvement that's going to happen without a change.
Excellent advice. Well, thank you everybody for joining us here with VIP Exchange Champions in the Chaos, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in the future.